In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King and the UN Secretary General discussed support for peace efforts in the Middle East and the repercussions of the Syrian crisis. The death toll continues to rise in the violence gripping Egypt. The United States says it will continue to review aid to Egypt, while Britain and France call for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. And a car bomb attack on the southern Beirut stronghold of Hezbollah group leaves 20 people dead. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King discussed with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon current developments in the Middle East, particularly efforts to bring about peace in the region and the repercussions of the Syrian crisis. King Abdullah said the United Nations had a key role to support to achieve peace between Palestinians and Israel based on the two-state solution and the Arab Peace Initiative. He also commended U.S. diplomacy for the resumption of peace negotiations that would lead to an independent Palestinian state on June 4, 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital and living in peace and security alongside Israel. He said a solution to all final status issues and an independent and viable Palestinian state is a strategic Jordanian interest. His Majesty also stressed the status of Jerusalem for Muslim and Christian Arabs, warning that Israel's policies to Judaize the city, change its identity and pursue aggression against holy sites will undermine attempts to make progress in the peace process. On Syria, King Abdullah stressed a transitional and comprehensive political solution to end the cycle of violence and bloodshed and preserve the country's unity. The King also said Jordan's hosting of more than 500,000 Syrian refugees has placed a heavy burden on the kingdom's already limited resources and infrastructure, especially in the country's north. He called for more support to Jordan by UN agencies to ease increasing pressures on the country as a result of hosting such a huge number of refugees. Ban praised the King's efforts to achieve peace in the region, pledging to work with the international community to increase aid for Jordan to deal with the refugees problem. Minister of Foreign and Expatriate Affairs Nasser Judi also discussed with the UN Secretary General ways of supporting Palestinian-Israeli peace talks, which began yesterday, and other regional developments. They reviewed efforts to kickstart negotiations, including U.S. diplomacy, and the need to encourage the two sides to pursue the quest of peace. Judi also spoke about the fallout of the Syrian crisis on Jordan, which he said had incurred a burden despite its economic hardship. The foreign minister said in a joint press conference with Ban that the UN chief's visit to the region was aimed to push forward the negotiating track that Palestinians and Israelis had taken under U.S. auspices.
الهدف الأساسي من زيارته هو تحريك ودفع.
His visit basically aims to nudge the track adopted by the Palestinians and Israelis to kickstart US-sponsored negotiations. The Secretary General knows that the position of Jordan under the leadership of His Majesty the King is based on the higher Jordanian interest of setting up an independent, viable and contiguous Palestinian state which lives alongside Israel and all regional states with East Jerusalem as its capital. This is a principled position by Jordan, and we have a vested interest in this respect. Thus, we say over and again that Jordan is not a mediator, but a country with an interest.
Ban stressed the importance of Jordanian diplomacy led by His Majesty the King to jumpstart the peace process.
I'm here to discuss with His Majesty King Abdullah and also Minister how we can work together to encourage the ongoing Middle East peace process. After long absence of negotiation, finally they have agreed and they started to negotiate, encouraging. And I'd like to highly commend the leadership and courage of President Abbas of Palestine State and also Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. We need to strongly encourage them so that this negotiation will have productive results.
Separately, King Abdullah welcomed U.S. Senator Robert Corker, member of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, to discuss the latest developments in the Middle East and the ongoing efforts to achieve peace in the region. His Majesty affirmed Jordan's support to the efforts to find a solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in keeping with a two-state solution, noting that Israel must stop its unilateral policies and measures in Jerusalem and in regards to the Islamic and Christian holy sites in order to achieve progress in peace efforts. The meeting also touched upon cooperation between Jordan and the U.S. and ways to boost mutual ties in all fields. Corker commended efforts led by His Majesty the King to usher comprehensive gradual reform in the kingdom and His Majesty's important role in cementing security and stability in the region. He stressed that Washington will continue its support to Jordan as it struggles to deal with a large number of Syrian refugees and provide them with humanitarian services. Mr. Abdullah Mansour said a loan guarantee agreement signed between Jordan and the United States will support the kingdom's economic and financial reform efforts. He said during the signing ceremony that the deal demonstrates the United States' outstanding support of Jordan through helping the country meet its financing needs. The guarantee allows Jordan to borrow from international lenders at a relatively low interest rate. Mansour lauded the U.S. government, represented by the Deputy Chief of Mission, Stephanie Williams, and the U.S. Aid Mission Director, Beth Page, for its constant support of the kingdom. The Prime Minister added that the deal will also allow Jordan to obtain financing with competitive interest rates at a par with U.S. government borrowing, which will reduce the government's debt service payment. The U.S. Embassy said in a statement that the agreement will make it easier for the government to borrow money from international markets so it can provide critical services to the citizens as it enacts economic reforms while hosting a growing number of Syrian refugees. Under the agreement, the U.S. government plans to provide the kingdom guarantees on Jordanian government bonds totaling $1,225 million for a period of up to 7 years. The Egyptian government vowed to confront what it called terrorist acts by the Muslim Brotherhood. A government statement said security forces will use live ammunition to counter any attacks against themselves or public buildings. However, international condemnation rained down on Cairo's military battlers for ordering the storming of protest camps supporting deposed President Mohamed Morsi. U.S. President Barack Obama cancelled plans for upcoming military exercises with the Egyptian army, while Britain and France called for an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council. Khaled Ababni has an update.
After a bloody security crackdown, supporters of deposed President Mohamed Morsi remain defiant. The Brotherhood and its allies said they suffered a heavy blow from the crackdown, their central coordination has been lost, and the bloodshed means anger is now beyond control. The bloodshed has made it more difficult for the Brotherhood to persuade its members to stick to peaceful resistance. Hundreds of supporters of the Brotherhood stormed Al-Giza's governorate building in Cairo and set it ablaze. In Alexandria, hundreds marched to protest against yesterday's violent breakup of Brotherhood sit-ins in the capital, citing nationwide violence in which at least 525 people died and thousands wounded. At least 7 soldiers were shot dead by unknown gunmen near the city of Al-Arish in the North Sinai region. As violence and clashes spread, the funeral of 6 policemen was held at a mosque in downtown Cairo. Charred and mutilated bodies of more than 200 Egyptians lie in Al-Iman Mosque in Cairo. Some corpses were charred and others had smashed skulls and riddled with bullet holes in their heads and chests. Amid the chaos, Egypt's cabinet met for talks as the government said it was determined to confront what it called terrorist acts by the Brotherhood. A government statement said it saw what it described a criminal plan to demolish the pillars of the Egyptian state, but stressed it was seeking an inclusive political process open to anyone who was not involved in violence. Interim Prime Minister Hazem Biblawi and Interior Minister Mohammed Ibrahim visited a police station and shook hands with police. The crackdown has brought worldwide criticism, with many countries condemning the imposition of a state of emergency and a curfew. U.S. President Barack Obama canceled plans for upcoming military exercises with the Egyptian army, which Washington funds with $1.3 billion in annual aid.
The United States strongly condemns the steps that have been taken by Egypt's interim government and security forces. We deplore violence against civilians. We support universal rights essential to human dignity, including the right to peaceful protest. As a result, this morning we notified the Egyptian government that we are canceling our biannual joint military exercise, which was scheduled for next month. Going forward, I've asked my national security team to assess the implications of the actions taken by the interim government and further steps that we may take as necessary with respect to the Egyptian relationship.
British Prime Minister David Cameron condemned the violence in Egypt and paid tribute to a Sky News cameraman who died on Wednesday.
Looking more broadly at the situation in Egypt, this violence is not going to solve anything. What is required in Egypt is a genuine transition, genuine democracy. That means compromise from all sides, the President, Morsi supporters, but also the military.
Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan called for the UN Security Council to convene quickly after what he described as a massacre in Egypt. Cairo and other areas were largely calm overnight after the army-installed government declared a month-long state of emergency and imposed a dusk-to-dawn curfew on the capital and 10 other provinces. Hala Dababne for the News at 10.
Egyptian authorities shut the Rafah border crossing with the Gaza Strip a day after a bloody crackdown against supporters of Assad President Mohammed Morsi. Travelers were stranded on the Gaza side of the crossing, the only gateway out of the Hamas-ruled territory that bypasses Israel. Palestinians complained about the gate shutdown as they stood under sweltering desert heat. Some had brought their children. An Egyptian official said the curb was not a punishment for Hamas's Islamists, but an effort to reduce civilian traffic as military operations were stepped up against militants in the Sinai region bordering Gaza. 20 people were killed and many more wounded when a huge explosion struck southern Beirut near a complex by Lebanon's militant group Hezbollah. An Islamist group calling itself the Brigades of Aisha claimed responsibility, saying it targeted Hezbollah and promised more attacks. At least 5 nearby buildings were damaged and many cars in the area were destroyed. The blast sent a column of black smoke over the densely populated area in the south of the capital. A local television said some people were still trapped inside buildings at the scene, close to the Sayyid al-Shuhada complex, where Hezbollah leader Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah often addresses his followers. Over to Iraq. It was a bloody day in the Iraqi capital, where car bombings have left at least 33 people dead and injured over 100. A car bomb exploded in the Kadhimiya neighborhood, killing 6 people and wounding 22 others. An attack in Baladiyat in eastern Baghdad killed 5 people and wounded 17 when a car bomb exploded near a police station. Another bomb in Ashurt al-Rabi'a district killed 4 and wounded 18. In Husayna, northeast of Baghdad, 3 people were killed and 14 wounded when a minibus driver left his vehicle armed with a bomb in a repair shop. And in the city of Baquba, the capital, 2 roadside bombs exploded, killing 14 people and wounding 26. Since the start of the year, attacks using multiple car bombs have become an almost daily occurrence, killing scores of people across the country. UN chemical weapons investigators are ready to visit Syria to investigate allegations such arms were used in the conflict. The Syrian government and the opposition have accused each other of using chemical weapons, and both have denied it. Rebels continue to battle government forces in the suburbs of the capital, Damascus. Rebels were seen preparing to shell what they say is a government forces stronghold in the district of Qaboon. Residents in the suburb of Erbil were digging in the rubble of collapsed houses in the aftermath of an airstrike, dragging out the bodies of 2 girls. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces control much of and central Syria, while rebels hold northern areas near the Turkish border. The northeast corner is now an increasingly autonomous Kurdish region. All 18 Navy personnel on board the Indian submarine that exploded and sank in a Navy base are still missing. Rescue operations continued around the clock to locate and evacuate the sailors. The submarine was docked at the main naval base in Mumbai when two blasts rocked the vessel. Divers have managed to pry open the main hatch of the diesel-powered submarine more than 12 hours after the incident. We begin with the Western and Southern Open in Cincinnati, Ohio. Novak Djokovic made it to the third round of the tournament after beating Juan Monaco 7-5, 6-2. Djokovic will be determined to be the last man standing and become the first player to complete what the ATP Tour has dubbed the Career Golden Masters and win all 9 World Tour Masters titles.
Okay. Second match. Djokovic.
Rafael Nadal also qualified for the third round of the tournament, cruising past German Benjamin Becker 6-2, 6-2 in a game that lasted for 76 minutes. Though Becker saved 8 break points in his first 2 service games alone, he fell behind low the Spaniard. World number 3 Nadal broke Becker 2 more times in the second set, extending his hard-court winning streak to 11 matches. Wimbledon champion Marion Bartoli shocked the tennis world by announcing her retirement from the sport at the age of 28. Second round loss to Romanian Simona Halep at the Western and Southern Open, the French woman ranked 7th in the world said she couldn't do any more. Her surprise announcement comes just 6 weeks after she beat Germany's Sabine Lisicki in the Wimbledon final to claim her once and only Grand Slam title. And finally, a quick look at the weather forecast. Warm tonight with temperatures reaching the low 20s in the hilly areas, while winds will be northwesterly light. Tomorrow, a slight drop in temperatures is in the forecast, but it will remain relatively hot in the hilly areas and hot elsewhere, while winds will be northeasterly to northwesterly brisk, blowing dust in the desert region. Aqaba should expect a hot day tomorrow with northerly brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King and the UN Secretary General discussed support for peace efforts in the Middle East and the repercussions of the Syrian crisis. The death toll continues to rise in the violence gripping Egypt. The United States says it will continue to review aid to Egypt, while Britain and France call for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. And a car bomb attack on the southern Beirut stronghold of Hezbollah group leaves 20 people dead. And that's the end of tonight's news. I'm Rad Luptush. Thank you for watching.